So the rhetoric in South Africa is yet again taking another step up. This morning, logging into X, logging into pretty much every single social media I could find, what you see in this country, what is currently starting to happen and is continuing to happen, just looks like an ever increasing push towards something that I might not be able to say on YouTube because, well, YouTube doesn't like it. But let's just quickly talk about genocide and how it works. When people think of genocide, they think of Rwanda. They think of the night of the long knives. They think of the night where all of this stuff happened and 500,000 innocent Rwandans paid with their lives for some perceived racial slight. That's what people have in their minds when they think of genocide. What most people don't think about, and specifically people on the left, because education is a commodity that they simply do not have access to, is that that night was the culmination of years and months of pent up and built up resentment, of the allowance of racist rhetoric, and the allowance of dehumanization of the other side, which then ultimately culminates. And I genuinely believe, now, a lot of things can change. Let's just be very clear on this. I want to start off by saying we should always be praying that God intervenes and that he brings about change peacefully. Because I genuinely believe that that should always be our prayer. As Christians, war and violence should never be the first response to anything. We should pray, and I do. I pray for Cyril Ramaphosa. I pray for Julius Malema every single day because I believe that is what we're called to do. But that does not mean that we don't also, make ready for the alternative reaction. And I believe that in South Africa currently, we are starting to see the sort of amping up of that exact rhetoric. More and more on social media, you are starting to see just incredible violence being espoused by those on the left. Let me show you guys just some of it. Here you have Kubani that tweets this out. 105 likes on the tweet. To my fellow Black South Africans, in times of peace, let's prepare for war. The shooting range must be a play park for our kids, not Spurs. That's tweeted out. That's a post on X, currently available. Nothing's happening here. If you think to yourself, well, does it really rise? Yes, this rises to the level of saying we have to prepare for war. War is coming. What war? What exact specific war? The only thing Afrikaners have ever asked for since the dawn of democracy in South Africa is equal and fair treatment. There are no, or very few, I should say, there's obviously always going to be super racists out there, but there are very few white Afrikaners that want a return of apartheid, that want to exclude black people from the economy. We're merely asking for fair and equal treatment under the law. Take the language, for example, here. We will remove them. Get ready. We have no time for racists. What does that language tell you? And then the retweet here, please do. Racists must fall. This is very similar to the, punch a Nazi. That's all good and well, but the question is, what is your definition of a racist? What is your definition of a Nazi? Of course, here in South Africa, far too often, that definition is purely based on the color of your skin, because you and I are guilty by definition. Because we happen to be white, we are guilty of all the evils that they perceive to have been visited upon them by a system that most of them weren't even alive for. And now, of course, you have the same person here, and I'm going to show you other people as well, basically changing the narrative to saying, well, actually, all of this stuff you see here, yeah, that's just white people. It's white people saying, kill the Boer. Never mind the fact that it's Julius Malema singing it, right? It's white people apparently that did this. Yeah, it is white people that would ask for jobs. You guys keep going on about how white people are the only people that's employed and black unemployment is such a big problem. The only parties that seem to be doing anything and the only marches we ever see filled with black people in this country are marches by black people. But somehow this is us. Somehow this is the white population that you continuously say is just privileged and aren't unemployed at all. Like, the narrative doesn't make sense. But of course, this is exactly what happens in revolutions. As the revolution starts to falter, as the narrative starts to slip, the enemy becomes guilty of everything and anything. Everything has to be reinvented. The language effectively has to be reinvented. Then you have people like this Lady M. You're a settler in South Africa, know your place. Imagine if a white person were to say that to a black person. What do you think would happen? How much trouble do you think that person would be in? Would they lose their job? Would they become a pariah? But of course, if you're a black person, you're allowed to say things like this. You have Sizwe, the fighter, who says, Sisi, the settlers must never test us. Is that not a call for violence? Is that not a call at best, we should say that is a threat of violence, which technically is illegal. You shouldn't be allowed to threaten violence. And remember that one of the steps one of the stages of genocide is dehumanization. And you look at something like this, there's no need to entertain these dirty things, really. Becoming things, becoming animals, becoming objects. The whole point is to dehumanize as much as possible. More warnings, for example, here where you see these Afrikaners are starting something they won't be able to finish. Again, threats of violence. Will the government do anything about this? Will anything happen to any of these people who are currently going around social media threatening violence constantly on white people specifically? Of course not. Why would it? And of course, don't look to News24 for any help on this issue, because News24 just put this out. A full-scale attack on Afriforum, calling the men of Afriforum collaborators, traitors. And effectively, if you go through the article here, he tries to walk a very fine line, and it's actually an incredibly dishonest line, where he tries to paint these people from Solidarity, the people from Afriforum, as sort of like a fringe racist white group that must be dealt with. He actually calls for them to be dealt with sufficiently and absolutely in due course, right? They must be dealt with. And his argument here is actually to wait until Donald Trump is gone. Right here at the end, he says, Trump will come and go, but those compatriots who are abetting and promoting his lies of white victimhood will not be forgotten. Because he knows if they do anything right now, and remember, News24 is a state propaganda agency, he knows if they do anything right now, Donald Trump will absolutely send the United States military into South Africa. And if you think that won't happen, just look at what's currently happening in Canada. The western provinces of Canada are currently seceding from the Canadian government, and they're making a plea to America to join the United States of America, which would then mean that the United States military would come to their aid should the Canadian government try anything. Trump could very easily do something similar should things get to that level here in South Africa. But basically, this entire article reads as him very carefully between the lines, making it clear that these are traitors and these traitors must pay for it. He insists that there is no persecution or discrimination against white people, and instead he makes this asinine argument that there's no BEE, and most Afrikaners, I'll just quickly read this to you. They understand the majority of white Afrikaners are peace-loving, working-class South Africans who vote for the DA. They understood and accepted the principles of black economic empowerment and employment equity to restore some degree of balance and fairness after centuries of white advancement and enrichment to the detriment of the black majority. Like their black compatriots, they are furious when BE is abused by the corrupt political. What world is this man living in? But of course, he's a state propaganda center and a state propaganda agent. So that isn't true. I guarantee you, if you asked the majority of white South Africans, they would all reject BEE on the face of it. No one agreed with BEE ever, because BEE is open discrimination against white people. And again, of course, they won't cover this, but there you have it. Eskom is allowed to exclude white males from senior management appointments. How many times is South Africa, with the new Employment Equity Act of South Africa, would make it so that less than 4% of a company's entire workforce must be white or may be white? Any more than that, and you would be in breach, and the government can literally fine you up to 10,000 Rand a day. That's the reality of where we live. But of course, Adrian Basson is an enemy. This is a very evil man, and we should remember his name, because there will come a time. They're all calling for it. They're calling for it. Kill the Boer. Kill white people. Malema's Kill the Boer chant protected by law. We will kill white women. We will kill white children, and we will even kill your pets. White South Africans are 872% more likely to be murdered than the national average. That's a newspaper article. Here's another tweet here. Your choice should be based on this lovely picture right here. If you don't want to end up at the shrine, you gotta pack and go. That was from 14th of March, 2025. That's not that long ago. That's the calls going out right now in South Africa. That's what's happening on the ground right now in South Africa. But of course, we're told there's nothing wrong. There's nothing going on here. There's no discrimination. Trump is completely a liar, according to Adrian Basson at least. But then you go to this, Visagie Dad of Sassa, which is actually really cool. He actually posted the definition of genocide, the actual definition of genocide. Now, there's a lot more to it because genocide doesn't just doesn't just encircle the event of millions of people dying, but read specifically number 3 there. Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. How is that not currently the reality in South Africa? You have a government that every single day is coming up with new ways of punishing white people purely for being white. I mean, their own statistics, I broke this down for you guys. Their own statistics prove that there is a significant problem in this country, because if you actually go by per capita, which is how you should look at crime statistics, you will realize that the white farmers were 30 times more likely to be killed than the black workers of these farmers. And of course, here you have just more of the same, more rewriting of history. Racist rascals who can't wipe their ass. Black people raise their children and keep their houses tidy. Have any of you ever been to a township? They can't build, but only destroy. Literally, the whole of South Africa was built by us. You haven't built anything. What has the ANC built? What has the ANC contributed to this country? What has the black majority government done in this country that wasn't done by the white people first? That's why they were chased away from Europe. We weren't chased away from Europe. This just shows you the level of education for some of these people. We weren't chased away from Europe. We fled Europe thanks to religious persecution, you moron. They are irresponsible and uncivilized people who can't live with others peacefully. Next time when they say they built something, you show them this G20 summit billboard. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a war coming in South Africa. It will happen. And our prayer must always be that it doesn't. Our prayer must always be that it passes us by. But sometimes you have to ask yourself, when is enough enough? At what point do you realize that there is no reasoning with some of these people? And make no mistake, this will not be a racial war. I realize that there are some who really think that it will be. And I have some sympathy for that view. But this will be a war between good and evil. This will be a war between people who want freedom, who want to live their lives and don't want racial discrimination as part of the DNA of this country, with those who want absolute majority rule of this country at the expense of the minorities. Why do you think so many black people are up in arms over the whites that are leaving this country on the invitation of Donald Trump? Why are they so angry? They hate white people. They don't want white people here. And yet when the white people have the opportunity to leave, suddenly this is a big problem. I'll tell you why. Because the plan was never to get rid of the white people. The plan was always to murder the white people. They want to exact their punishment. They want their pound of flesh for the perceived wrongs that have been visited upon them, even though most of these people have never lived through apartheid and they don't even know what apartheid is. We are going towards a very dark period, and it is only going to get worse from here. I don't see it turning around, and I don't know how we turn it around. I know that there is only one who can, and that is God, Jesus Christ. We need Jesus in this country. We need his guidance. We need his principles. We need Christian nationalism. We need a movement of Christians that rise up and say, enough. We will not stand by and watch your evil be perpetrated upon this country anymore. We must be willing to stand for truth. We must be willing to die for it. Because that is what we're called to do. We are told in the Bible that we will be persecuted, that we will be hunted. And make no mistake, it is not just white people that they hate. Have you ever seen what happens to a black person that happens to speak against the narrative? Have you ever seen how much hatred black people pick up when they don't fit the communist socialist mandate, they are attacked, sometimes even worse than you or I. Go back to apartheid. Do you know that the majority of black people killed during apartheid wasn't even killed by white people? They were killed by other black people because they would not join, because they would not believe the lies of the ANC. They would not follow the ANC, and so they were put to death. Winnie Mandela was famous for necklacing people who would not join the protests, who would not join the violent uprisings. That is what they do. It is punishment, because that's the only way they can think. They are the forces of evil, and they must be resisted. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, if you like this video and you want more people to have access to the content that I make, please consider hitting the like button, hitting that subscribe button, and sharing this video around with as many people as possible. Massive shout out and thank you to all of the patrons as well as the YouTube channel members for continuing to support this channel and allowing me to do what I do. Link in the description down below for patrons. Join button right below this video for YouTube members. As always, be good to each other, be kind to each other, and I will see all of you in the next one. Peace.